Did she help her dad make his case today?
So, Joe, good to be back with you all. I don't think I think she was very inconsequential. I have to say, as the world knows, that I'm no fan of Trump's big lie or the crimes that he's been charged with and the underlying conduct or his candidacy. But I will say, as a former prosecutor, I'm not really sure why they called her. I don't think she contributed a single fact other than the fact she was 9 months pregnant when she got a call from one of the potential lenders. I don't think she contributed a single fact that it wasn't established by the documents already in evidence. So I worry that to some extent, as you know, both the New York civil case and certainly the criminal case by Alvin Bragg's office have been criticized as largely political exercises, particularly the way the Attorney General and Mr. Bragg campaigned on getting Trump. I think they may have played a little bit into his political hand today by calling Ivanka, because I don't think she added anything to the existing evidence.
Well, what about his other two adult children, Eric Trump, Donald Jr., and also former president himself, who had a very testy exchanges with the judge? What do you make of them?
Yeah, I apologize for interrupting there. So, Donald Trump was a terrible witness. I mean, I saw that Chris Kise, who, had an excellent reputation as a lawyer in Florida, said that Trump was the best witness he's had in 33 years. And I can just say, as a trial lawyer of longer than that I feel sorry for him because I thought that was terrible testimony. Trump made a series of errors in terms of getting much closer to the decisions and related to the financial statements than he did in his deposition. And he made some, significant concessions in that regard that I don't think helped him legally at all. As far as Eric and Don Jr., I didn't follow their testimony as closely, but I think understandably, it's not their company. I think that was the point that they made. They worked for their dad. They did what they did, but yes, I do think that Donald Trump made some serious concessions, that his testimony enhanced the case for the prosecution, certainly irritated the judge. But I also think at the same time, trying to be an honest broker here as a trial lawyer, that this trial and the outcome of this trial is pretty much preordained. I think we all know what the result is going to be: massive fines and penalties and some limitations on the ability of the Trump organization to do business in New York. We'll have to see how the appellate courts address that, because it's been a very unusual case procedurally, and I think the evidentiary phase, while it's gone well for the prosecution, there are some holes that are consequential.
Yeah. Ty Cobb, I have to ask you about what I read in the newspaper. You never know when you're going to see the name Ty Cobb pop up. It was in the Washington Post 2 days ago. And a story that the former president, Donald Trump, has told advisors and friends, as our viewers can see here, in recent months, he wants the Justice Department to investigate one-time officials and allies who've become critical of his time in office, including you. Has your phone been ringing?
So I quibble a little bit with the ex-attorney. One, I'm still an attorney, and two, I was never his attorney. I did represent the White House as an institution as special White House counsel, but I'm not sure what he wants to go after me for, but I'm sure that he will have a revenge-based administration if he gets elected. On the other hand, our current Constitution, to the extent it's honored, makes the mere fact that he has such a list solid defense to anybody who's on it.
It sounds like he wants to go after you for things like you're doing right now, going on television networks, speaking your mind, trying to explain what is going on in his felony trials.
Truth is an obstacle. Truth is an obstacle to him, and I think people like Bill Barr and John Kelly and others on that list who have spoken the truth are not in his good graces.